Okay, welcome everybody to the Development Control and Regulatory Board. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ewan Walters. I'm a Senior Democratic Services Officer here at the County Council. Can I just remind you all that this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and will be available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. So if you could please turn your microphones on when you're speaking and off when you're finished, just to ensure that you're heard on the webcasts. Okay? Now, as this is the first meeting of the council year, and indeed the first DCRB of this county council, the first item on the agenda is appointment of chairman of the Development Control and Regulatory Board for the year 2017-18. And Mr Coxon was nominated as chairman-elect at the council meeting on the 17th of May. Do I have anybody to propose Mr Coxon?
I propose Mr Coxon with great pleasure, Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Second that.
Thank you, Mr Lickerish, seconding that. So I therefore appoint Mr Coxon as chairman of the Development Control and Regulatory Board for the 2017-18 year. And I will hand over to you for Mr Coxon for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, and thank you for proposing and seconding me. Well, I welcome members and guests, visitors, speakers to the Development Control and Regulatory Board Thursday the 25th of May. Move on to item number 2, which is the election of Deputy Chairman for this next year. Is there a proposer for that then?
Could I propose Mr Gillard?
Could I second that proposal, please?
Any more? No. And Mr Gillard is elected as Deputy Chairman.
May I raise a query, Chairman? I noticed that the membership has gone down to 12, which is an even number. Could someone just confirm that's correct? Because I think it's unusual to have an even number on a committee.
I think it's 11. It's 11.
11, is it?
Oh.
7.
Okay. Moving on then. Item 3 is minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of April. I'll go through them page by page. There's not many pages, so page 3, 4 and 5. Would somebody move?
Move adoption, Chairman.
Yeah.
Second that, Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments on the minutes? No. Thank you. Item 4 is question time. There is no questions received. Item 5, questions asked on the members' standing orders. No questions have been put forward. Item 6, to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. Well, there's none of those either. No. Item 7, declaration of interest. It is noted that all members who are also members of a parish, town, district or a liaison committee will have personal interest in those applications which relate to areas covered by those authorities. Are there any other interests that... David?
Yeah, I seek advice on this, Chairman, because I'm not sure. But when we get to the counter-swap application, I have, over a number of years, been a governor both at the existing nursery school and Greenfield Primary School. Indeed, I was a governor at Greenfield before it was a primary school, when it was a separate Beechwood Infant School and Linden Junior School. And, of course, my children went there. I have no connection now with the school, either of them, and have not for some years, but I just put that on record that I have past service. Thank you.
Could we have advice on that, please?
Declare a personal interest, but you're quite able to take part and stay in the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Personal interest declared then, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Dan?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare that I'm a District Councillor for North West Leicestershire in regard to agenda item 10. I'd also like to confirm that I've not been lobbied by anybody on any of the items this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, I think that is covered by what I read out Dan, in the first place. But, okay. No, No other interest to be declared then. Item 8 is presentation of petitions under standing orders. I haven't had any petition presented, or the officers haven't received any. Item 9 is an application by Tarmac Trading, proposed storey modular building and office building. And Lonick is going to deal with that.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps I better introduce myself as well for those members who don't know me. I'm Lonick Wojtylewicz, Head of Planning, Historic and Natural Environment in the Chief Executive's Department, and I will normally be advising you at this board meeting. I will, from time to time, have other planning officers with me, and today I've got Mr. Marriott, who's a Principal Planning Officer. He's here to help us on one of the items in case members have some detailed technical questions which I can't help you with. I apologise also, Chair, that I couldn't make the training meeting, but I hope you all enjoyed your training, and just to say that there will be some additional training as and when required during the course of the year. So, Chairman, with that, the first item, as you quite rightly say, a proposal by Tarmac at Mount Sorrel Quarry, and this is a new office block within the quarry confines, and it is really a replacement of an existing two-storey building which has been there since 1997. It is within the quarry, and it is a very well screened area of the quarry. There are high walls and mounds, and those mounds are planted with thick vegetation, so it's pretty much invisible from outside. This is the existing office block which will be demolished, and the new office block will be put in this place. It'll be a lot bigger building, and it's been put in place because the old office is no longer fit for purpose, and there are a lot more staff needed to be accommodated as Tarmac use this site in connection with their operations, but also in connection with operations focused at this quarry but covering the East Midlands area. So, again, just to give you a bit of an insight, as an aerial photograph, there's the existing building, vegetation around. This is the area of land where they're going to build the new office. And I hope you can make out from that plan there's an L-shaped building, which is what is being proposed. And it's a fairly functional, modular style building to accommodate in the order of 200 staff. And as it is associated with the operations of the mining activity, it will be tied to the life of the quarry. As you know, mineral operations don't last forever, and at some point they will come to an end. So this will be tied to the life of the quarry. So when the quarry finishes, this site will be demolished and the site restored, unless they come back for a further planning consent. So with that, Chairman, the recommendation is to approve. There is a recommendation to have an associated section 106 to cover construction traffic, some travel planning and travel packs in order to have more sustainable access to the site. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lonick. Thanks for outlining that. Could I ask, have we had any comments from the ward member, Mr. Osborne?
Not aware.
No. Okay. We have a speaker on this item, Mr. Tim Deal, who is the estate manager from Tarmac. Mr. If you'd like to sit there, you've been given 3 minutes to speak, and if you would remain in the seat just after you've finished speaking, so that if there's anyone wants any point on clarification of what you've said, and it is only clarification on what you've said, Mr. Deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. I'm not planning to take up too much time. The proposal for the new replacement offices are pretty straightforward, and the planning conditions and the items to be included in the Section 106 agreement are considered totally appropriate and reasonable. Mr. Hunt, as the planning officer, has provided helpful pre-application advice and has been proactive throughout the consultation process. So I therefore hope that you will be able to support the recommendation that you have in front of you. Just on a personal note, after 30 years of representing the company's planning and property work in Leicestershire through Redland, Lafarge Tarmac, and now Tarmac, I am now passing the baton on. So just so for the record, over that time, I've been coming here for 30 years, I've always considered your planning authority to be what I describe as a shining beacon, giving high service levels in what's often a sea of sort of change and uncertainty created through government policy, changes in plan making, EU directives, declining government funding, and also actually pressure on growing demands for staff resources. So within all of that, the time I've been coming here, I've always held Leicestershire as an example that other people should look at and say, well, that's how we think that planning should be conducted. So I just wanted to say a personal thank you to the officers, members of the council who have consistently provided professional planning service over those years and backed by stable political decision making. So I've done my stint, I'm passing the baton on, and this may well be my last visit, so I thought I ought to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deal. I don't know whether there are any questions for clarification with that statement, but no, I don't think they are. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming. Right, it's open to members now then. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations on your elevation. Yeah, fairly straightforward. No objections from any of the consultees, so I'll propose that we permit.
Second.
May I ask a question, please? Thank you. It's in regard to the quote, not fit for purpose. So, for members' information, it's on page 10, it's point 8. And it reads, this building is no longer fit for purpose and needs to be replaced. For clarification, what is meant by the building is no longer fit for purpose? Thank you.
Chairman, I'm not sure if I know the precise answer on that, because that is the words that the company gave us. As far as they're concerned, it's not fit for their purpose. So I think from your point of view, all you need to be considered on is the replacement proposal acceptable or not? If it is, then you grant permission. If it's not, then you can do something else. Chairman, thank you.
Are you happy with that, Chancellor?
In the confines of the planning regulations, that if a company or individual puts an application in and it's granted planning permission, then obviously the reason I'm asking it is because having been a district councillor since 2012, I've never seen that phrase used in a planning officer's report at Chelmsford Borough Council, and it doesn't seem very descriptive. It seems quite vague. You know, what is the problem but that's surpassed then if it's the case that obviously due to planning law, if someone puts an application in and it's deemed acceptable, then the company or the individual can do what they want with the previous building, which I presume will just be to demolish this building.
Sorry?
Chairman, I don't know if you want me to comment. Yes, I understand the question. It's. I think all we're doing in this planning report is reflecting the reason why the company has submitted this application. They say it's not fit for purpose. And I think, Chairman, you probably find that from time to time when you get applications by the County Council itself for mobiles, you'll see that term used as well, but there may be more description of why it's not fit for purpose. The intention is to demolish the building and use this building in its stead. So the question for you, Chairman, and members is, this is what they want. Is it acceptable? Grant approval subject to the conditions that we've advised, or others as you may wish, or refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Lonnie. Mr. Bolter.
Thank you. Just a matter of clarification. Paragraph 20. Safe policy EV1 seeks to ensure a high standard of design. I don't think that fits in with a high standard of design. So are we going to waive that consideration in view of the site it's in?
No, Chairman. We have to take that into account. It is not a bad design. You're quite right. It does say high design, but there are a number of policies here which you need to consider, and I didn't explain that fully for you in my presentation, but it is in the report. Normally, when you are considering things like office development, national policy or local policies push those kind of developments to employment uses, particularly in town centres. So that's the sort of main thrust of planning policies. But you are allowed to grant planning permission for offices elsewhere if it's associated, for instance, in a rural area, to a business. This is inside a quarry. Quarry operations look very industrial, and they do last a long time, but they are temporary, and they are, by and large, placed in the countryside. So the policy applies that this is actually in the countryside, albeit within an industrial complex that's going to be here for a number of times. So you have to balance the level of design required to meet the requirements of its location. So here is a location in an industrial setting, completely surrounded by vegetation, completely screened, and in my view, it is of sufficiently high design to warrant a consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lonnie. If there's no further comments or questions, we'll move on to agenda item number... I'm sorry. I do apologise, I'm new, you see. Could we have a vote then, please? All in favour of Michael? That looks to be unanimous on you. Thank you.
In favour? Yeah.
Go on. I didn't. Okay. We'll move on to item number 10 now, which is the application by Barden Estates. Lonnie, would you do that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a proposal by Agrit Industries for a revision to a planning consent that this board granted back in 2011. And what I've put up there is a slide which was used at the time of the existing planning permission, because it really sets the context for you and gives you a bit of background to what you need to think about this afternoon. I'm not sure how well you can see it from where you're sitting, but the original planning permission back in 2011 was this red line that you can see that covers most of what you see on this slide. And those of you who are familiar with the area, this is part of Colville here, and this is the Barden Industrial Estate. The A511 comes along here. This is an existing Barden quarry, which has been here, as you see from the report, for a very long time. And leading up to 2011, the company put forward a very significant extension to that quarry, which was granted planning permission in this area here. And that was for an additional 132 million tonnes. And I say that because that figure is important, because this site, along with a number of sites in Leicestershire, is of national significance. So it does provide the nation with a lot of the need for this type of material, particularly where parts of the country where it doesn't have this type of material, and that's London and the southeast, as well as the northwest. So this quarry, and equally Mount Sorrel that we just talked about, are quarries of strategic importance. Now, what was the proposal at that time was to extract from here, put a primary crusher in here, and I don't know if you can make out, there is a conveyor belt moving from here, tunnelling under a previously restored area of land, and then coming out back to the processing plant and into this quarry. So the idea would be that as this finished working, the next 3 or 4 years, extraction would start here. Some of this, what's called overburden, will be used to fill that quarry by use of the conveyor, and also the mineral will be carried by the conveyor as well. As the company started to develop its detailed workings on how to tunnel through here, they found that this area of land was actually settling at quite a fast rate for these kind of things. So they say it's settling at 25 millimetres a year, about an inch a year. And considering that the conveyor is planned to be there for the life of the quarry, which is 40 years, they have found that the risk of drilling through that is too great in terms of safety and also a commercial operation, and practically getting the mineral from that side into here. So what you'll see from the report is that they're looking of an alternative route, and they've considered a number of routes which I haven't shown for you, because what you need to consider is what they're proposing. And what they're proposing is a route coming along here, and there are some slides which are going to follow which shows you the route in more detail, but basically they're changing from going round the north to coming round the south. And why that's important for you to consider, and why we need to consider it carefully, is that within the overall site you'll see that this planning permission showed extraction areas, some areas within the operational site but not being worked. And so what's happening now is the conveyor will be coming across an area, although within the existing planning permission back in 2011, was through an area that showed no working for that operation. So clearly there'll be a disturbance now across here, which this report is asking you to consider. Also of interest is, see highlighted in yellow, some listed buildings in and around the site, which will become relevant as we go through the report. So, Chairman, this is the up-to-date plan now that we've got. Apologies, it's not as clear as it should be from this distance, but there's the line of the approved conveyor, which was on that previous slide. But now, as you can see here, this is where the new conveyor will come along the lip of the new quarry, excavation works, in a cutting from here through to the edge of the old quarry, and then into the quarry and the processing plant and into the void. There are two conveyors side by side with a maintenance road in the middle. One carries the mineral, so from the processing plant the mineral goes along here, from the crusher to the processing plant, and right by its side is the conveyor that carries the overburden, and you'll see that goes off into the void there, because that will be used to backfill at least part of that void. And what I'll show you now are a number of slides which will look in more detail at each of these sections. Some of these sections are probably more important to look at than others, and so I'll skip through those fairly quickly. So where the issues are in the report is across this area, because this is the area where there's new disturbance. And particularly you'll see from the report in this area along the A511 there are some residential properties, and you'll see from the report there is a representation made by residents of this property which raises a number of issues for you to consider in relation to how that might affect this property, bearing in mind, of course, in the context that operations are ongoing here and ongoing here in a fairly large proposal that's already got planning permission. So if we start, I'm going to work from this end, and you'll see some slides and some cross-sections, and the cross-sections are important because that gives you an idea of how this route moves through the land. So I'm going to start through here, a number of slides that will lead you to there, and I think what I'll do, I'll dwell on this particular area, because the kind of things we need to think about are this listed building and its setting and how that affects it, and these properties here and how they're affected in terms of visual, dust and noise. There are some other issues, but again, a long and comprehensive report, a 50-page report, is a very detailed report. It is accompanied by an environmental impact assessment, which is set out for you in the report. So my job is to really just to highlight some of the key issues for you in order to help you through it. So the first section is this bit here, and if I go back here, we'll start in here. The first thing they do is they've got an emergency stockpile. It's a safety measure in case something happens to the processing plant. They can have somewhere to dispose of the material as they repair anything that might go wrong. So that one is not really a big issue. It's within an existing area, and that just goes from the crusher straight across there. And you'll see the profile in terms of how the land looks from the primary crusher there across to the pile. Again, won't dwell on that too much. The next section is this section here along the excavated area, the proposed excavated area. Again, probably won't dwell too much on this one, but what you'll see there are some transfer towers that are in place to change the direction of the conveyor belts. So here you'll see how the conveyor runs along the side of the quarry, and these bits here are just expanded for you so you can see a bit more detail on these transfer towers. Again, sort of not dwelling too much on here because they are within the existing operations. Again, this now shows you the area that's going to be underground. And it shows you, oops, sorry, I beg your pardon. Let me go forward. I pressed the wrong button. Apologies, Chairman. Yeah, so we're going to look at this area here now. This is the new area. Again, I know it's quite difficult to see these slides, but it gives you sort of an idea of the mounds and how these conveyors are hidden or sunk below ground in order to avoid visual and noise impacts. Again, more details showing how the conveyor goes beneath the ground and the towers above. I just want to get to this bit, Chairman, really, because this is one of the areas that you need to consider, really. And this is the area where I was pointing to you. There are some residential properties off the plan here on A511. And this is where the conveyor cuts through land that's not been operated before, but there is a mound here that's already in place, and there are some cross sections I'm going to show you going through there and going through there on the next couple of slides. So what you'll see here is the mound I talked about, and if you think that this is sort of on the A511 end, the road that we just saw, looking back into the quarry, you'll see the mound rises, there's vegetation, and then the conveyor is cut into a 2-meter deep tunnel, open tunnel. And again, there's a cross-section along the route, along this route, shows how it goes. And again, some details. If you cut through there and look across ways, you'll see that there is this barrier which tries to screen the conveyor as best it can. Again, more details in this area, and here now you'll see a better view of the properties, and you'll see there's a little line there going, a cross-section there. What the company are doing here, there's an existing mound which I've shown you there, and they are proposing to put an additional mound here, which you can see on the cross-section there. So, unfortunately, this is a bit more difficult to read because this end is at this end, and that end is here. So you're looking across that way, so you'll see the A511. This is the lodge, which is a listed building there, the trees here. Then you get here to the mound, and then you've got the tower and a substation, which, again, at this point, what happens here is, probably not too clear here, is that this is in a 2-meter wide trench, but from here, this actually drops down at some depth, and it goes in two directions. The mineral goes this way to the processing plant, and the overburden turns around and goes into the void. But both actually drop down into the ground. And I think I've got a slide which shows that shortly. Again, similar views of how the conveyor is shielded. And here, I think, is where it drops down, and this is the conveyor, which actually will be suspended across the existing void. And this bit here is blown up for you here, and this is where I think it drops on the ground, and then it comes out through a tunnel into the void, and the rest of the mineral goes to the processing plant. Sorry I took a bit of time on that, Chairman, but it is quite a sort of technical and complicated matter to think about, but it might be best if I go back to the overall plan and help members get into the context of it. So the issues that we've got in the report here is what is the impact of this compared to the existing planning permission, and what can be done about that, if anything, if you are minded to approve it. Now, one of the issues that you need to assess is the issue around heritage. Listed buildings in both national planning policy and in planning law is very important. And the national government says you have to give listed buildings or heritage assets and their settings great weight. But nothing is ever straightforward in planning, because equally elsewhere in planning guidance it says the excavation of minerals and supply of minerals, you have to give great weight. So you've got two things pulling in opposite directions here. Our assessment of this, and based on the view of our consultees, is that this is far enough away from the setting of listed building not to have an effect. And don't forget, this will be, apart from the towers, which will be screened, they will be at a ground level because they'll be in a trench. There is some disturbance to the field patterns here, but again, I think on balance, this is probably tips towards being acceptable and won't have an adverse effect on the heritage assets. This is going to be here for quite a long time, even though it's temporary. Eventually it will be restored, but nevertheless you've got to consider that there will be a number of years where this will be in operation if you give it the go-ahead. In terms of landscape, you saw all the cross-sections and the way that it's been hidden, and also there is a right-of-way which has been moved further south to give some protection to the footpaths around here. I think it used to go here and it's gone here, and the other footpath will go across the bridge. Noise has been assessed, particularly around the impact of these properties, and you'll see from the report that there is a recommendation that there's an additional noise monitoring point put in this area. There's about 300-metre distance, and you'll remember the mound and the foliage and how it's behind there. The other thing that is being proposed, and we recommend that happens, is that on these transfer towers there will be clad in some shielding material which will help to lessen the noise. But these towers which are closest to the property, there are about 3 of them, they'll be double clad to give that extra insulation. And the assessment that's been done means that that will drop down to what is already the existing noise controls across the site, around about 55 dBA. But the dominant noise in that area will still be the A511, and those of you who know the A511 will know what I mean. Issues around dust, again, have been tested. There is an overall dust action plan and a dust mitigation scheme that covers the whole quarry. This will be brought into that, and again, an additional dust monitor will be placed in this area. I think it's going to go by the lodge. And again, once this is finished, the whole site will be restored, and the existing landscape and field patterns will be returned to as it was prior to this proposal coming forward. I think I better stop there, Chairman, because it's quite a long and technical introduction, but I hope that's helped members to understand the proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lon. It's helpful to have so much detail. we've got a speaker on this item, Kirsten Hanniford Hill, who's the estate surveyor. Would you like to sit down, Kirsten? We've been allotted 3 minutes to speak, and if you'd remain in the seat just to see if there's any points of clarification on what you've said. You and Will time you. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. Bardon Hill Quarry is a strategic site for aggregate industries, a flagship site for the company and UK head office. In August 2011, Leicestershire County Council granted planning permission for an extension to Bardon Hill Quarry, permitting 132 million tonnes of mineral to be extracted from land to the south east within the company's estate. The permitted scheme included final contouring, landscaping of Tip 18, creation of new landscape perimeter screening, new primary crusher, conveyor system to transport overburden to the original quarry void, and mineral to the existing processing plant. The company is pleased to announce that the final contouring of Tip 18 with overburden and soils from the permitted extraction extension has been completed. The perimeter landforms are progressing well, and the company are working tirelessly on developing the infrastructure necessary to realise the 132 million tonne reserve. The application presented to you today is to realign the conveyor route, transporting materials to existing infrastructure located to the west. The original route travelled north and then west through historic tips. The company have been monitoring these tips since planning permission was granted, and it has been established that the land is settling at 25 mm per annum. The impact of this settlement upon the permitted tunnel and conveyor route poses unacceptable safety, construction and operational risks. The company has therefore sought an alternative conveyor route which is primarily cut through virgin material, reducing any potential for settlement. The route has taken into consideration the SSI, semi-ancient woodland and setting of the listed building, primarily Bardon Hall. The route would also seek to minimise public disturbance, environmental and ecological impacts. Although the proposed route does move away from properties along Green Hill Estate, Delphine Close and Kenmore Crescent, it does move closer to residents along the A511. To reduce the impact, the conveyor will be placed in a cutting. Additional screening bung created near the A511. The conveyors will be covered, and transfer structures located closest to the A511 will receive enhanced acoustic cladding, reducing noise and dust nuisance. The company is aware of the sensitivity of the scheme to residents along the A511 during construction and is committed to keeping the potential disturbance to a minimum. The company takes its environmental obligation very seriously. During 2016, the company did experience dust exceedances at Forest Lodge along the A511, which were fully investigated. The principal cause was a temporary crushing operation located near the stocking area on the A511. Upon realising the impact of this operation, all monitoring crushing equipment was removed, stockpile heights have been reduced and dust suppression improved. Although the company has experienced individual dust exceedances, the site is overall compliant with dust, noise and blast limits. Bardon Hill Quarry is a large site with many sensitive receptors. The company is constantly seeking to prove its operation both environmentally and socially, and strives to be compliant with our planning conditions. The proposed amendment shall not significantly impact the permitted scheme or impede our community commitments, including
Kirsten,
improved footpaths, cycling routes.
Good try. Thank you very much. Did anyone ask any questions on clarification of what Kirsten?
I'll just seek one clarification, Mr. Chair. On the part where the cutting is, had any consideration been given to put a roof on the cutting? Bear in mind you were going to tunnel on the other side, so you could actually dig an open trench and just put a roof on it with panels that could be removed if you needed to get to the conveyor.
It was considered. It did provide operational concerns and issues, and also with regards to landscaping, it would actually have to be domed, so it would actually be more visual and intrusive than the actual cutting on its own. So with it being just a cutting and the landscape topography at an angle, if you're at the south along the public rights of way, you won't actually see the conveyor and the conveyor itself within the cutting. So it was to reduce visual impact.
Thank you, Kirsten. Oh, hang on. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The three towers, what are the function of those?
apologies. Sorry. So it's electronic motors controlling the conveyor system. So.
Thank you very much. Moving on to members then. There's been no comments, I understand, from Mr. Wyatt, Mr. Bedford or Dr. Inan. Dan Harrison is here, who's mentioned as the other person as ward member. So, Dan, have you got anything you'd want to say at this time?
I'm just concerned about the conveyor because it's been mentioned just previously. If there's wind and you've got new materials, obviously it's going to potentially have a dust problem. I understand what's been said about a dome, but I actually use that road quite frequently, and I can remember a year or two ago coming by, not regularly, and all the dust over the roadside. So there has been in the past a problem, and it's just making sure that what we're not going to do is build another cause of more irritation and problems. I don't know the answer other than some sort of cover that my colleague mentioned previously, but there will be a problem there, I'm sure.
Could you answer that?
Thank you, Chairman.
If you can, anyway.
I'll give some comments on that. Yes, obviously dust control is not just on this conveyor, as you quite rightly say. It's across the whole site, which as you can see, there's very large operations which will be going on. But in order to try to help you, Chairman, to understand here, I was trying to find the graphic here. These are the conveyors, and you can see a little cover on each one. So each one will actually be covered over. So each conveyor has got sort of, I don't know if they're tarpaulin or in the metal, yeah, some cladding covers, so they'll be completely enclosed. Okay. They're completely enclosed, Chairman, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just check that on the 511, if we look at the actual plan, the wind direction is predominantly from the southwest, so that's this bottom left-hand corner. So we assume in the UK that our wind direction is that, and therefore it seems to, if there is any conveyor problem, push the any dust that way. But Lonix already said, of course, the conveyors are covered. And so I would have thought that the major dust would have been from the primary crusher only, unless I'm wrong. And am I right? Is that sprayed or not? I just make those comments because that's what I've picked up here. But I'd appreciate an officer comment that I'm on the general right track, if you wouldn't mind, Chairman.
Yeah, would you deal with that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, in terms of the wind direction, Chairman, Mr. Pendleton's right. But I think mention has been made that there has been some dust exceedances in terms of the monitoring. Not that many, but a few. But there was a reason why that happened, and it was, I understand, somewhere in this area where they brought on a mobile plant. I think Miss Hannaford Hill were trying to mention that. I'm not sure how far she got to explaining that to you, but there was an issue on that. But it was during a period around about this time of year when the wind direction was actually coming from this way, but most of the time the wind direction is that. So I think with any quarry operations, Chairman, particularly one that's operating over a long, long period of time, mineral planning authorities understand that things change on operations every day. It's not like housing. On industrial development, you build it and that's it. It's finished, apart from the odd conservatory or extension. Here, operations happen every day. Landscape changes every day. Disturbance is done every day. So the controls that we put on are very important. There are over 65 planning conditions on the existing consent, together with a Section 106 agreement. So the conditions are there as tools to ensure that we can monitor and do something about it. Like in this case, there was a dust problem. We monitored it. we found the dust problem, we found the location, and the mobile plant was then moved out of the way, and we solved that problem. So that's the sort of the toolkit that you have.
Yeah.
The best way to describe it, Chairman.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Trevor. Mr. Crooks, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Nobody's mentioned about noise levels, or perhaps I haven't recognised it. In the report somewhere, it talks about it being right on the limit. Is that on the limit without it being sunk into the ground, or is this putting it down into a culvert? Is that going to improve it, or is it going to be on the limit all the while?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the way this is done, and I think this is maybe the concern of the objector that's written in, and you would have read the letter which is attached to your report. I mean, quite valid concerns being raised and things that we need to deal with, and I believe that they are dealt with in the report. The way that noise calculations are done, they're a predictive tool, so they work out how much noise is made by this conveyor, combined with the tower, combined with other things, and they come to calculation, work out how far away you are from the property, from your receptor, what's in the way, and then if that comes out at a noise higher than 55 in this case, which is the overall planning condition over the whole site, which currently exists, you then say, well, how can we get that down? And that's what they've tried to do. They put more cladding on, put more bunding in, until you get down below 55. And I think the aim will always be to get to that level. And it is a line in the sand. There is, I know it's to say it's just on the limit. Well, it is within the limit, and that's it. It's either in the limit or it's not in the limit, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the alternatives, I mean, they all have an impact, all of them, particularly on woodland in various cases. But that's the only sort of assessment of the alternatives that we've got before us. We don't know whether the proposed route by the applicant is the cheapest, the most convenient. It obviously suits their purpose, as it would. They're the applicant. But we don't know, whether any of the other alternatives could have alleviated some of the problems around noise. So we'll take it on face value. On paragraph 56 on page 32, the last sentence says the potential harm from the rerouted conveyor would equate to less than substantial harm. I'm struggling to understand exactly what that sentence implies. Less than substantial. Does it mean significant harm? I mean, at the risk of being, pedantic, a bit of clarity. Also, on page 34, paragraph 66, a plea for plain English, please. The sort of last sentence starts, it is not considered, and then it's sort of a comma after adverse effects, and then goes to any unacceptable adverse impact. It's as though it's leading the sentence somewhere else. The phraseology doesn't make sense, if you see what I mean. That's paragraph 66. Significant adverse effects. Nor to any unacceptable adverse impact. I'm sorry, I agree I'm being pedantic here, but it's important that
line's being missed out.
It's as though some word or phraseology is not quite right there. Mrs. Lloydell would be proud of me.
She would.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps to deal with that point first. I'm all for plain English, and I suppose, yes, when you read that, it does look a bit convoluted, but I think what it's trying to do there is we've looked at all the individual things together. When you add them all together, and along with anything else, is there still a problem? And the answer is no, we don't think it's a bad enough problem. There's always going to be impact. There's no question about that. The question you have to ask yourself, is it an acceptable impact? So I'll take that on board, Chairman. Maybe in future we'll say things a bit plainer. In terms of the alternatives, I said at the beginning I haven't got a slide showing all the alternatives because I don't think it's our job to say, to do a beauty contest and choose which is the best route and say, oh, that's the best one, that's what we like. Because for all we know, all of them could be acceptable to a lesser or greater extent. But you're quite right. The company have in mind what's good for them, what's best for them, what works, what's practical, how much it costs, and so on and so forth. But they also know that they need to get planning permission, so they need to address any impacts, and they need to make sure that they do sufficient to satisfy you, Chairman, that they can do it in an acceptable manner. And you see from the report that there are some issues, and we believe that subject to the conditions that we've got and the existing conditions on the existing consent, this will probably work, Chairman. Thank you.
Just two questions, Chair. How far is it from the nearest house, this new conveyor route on that corner? How far are the houses away from it? First question. I thought that's confirmed.
Right, Chairman. We'll just get that for you in a moment.
Just for the record, Chair, that's all.
Yes, paragraph 4, I'm being told. So the application site is band A51. Halfway down, several residential properties lie along the Bardon Road, the nearest privately owned being some 150 metres from the proposed conveyor route.
No, that's a nice point. The nearest privately owned. Who owns your other houses if they're not privately owned?
I think that'll be company owned, Chairman.
Right, okay. And the second question is, on page 28, paragraph 37, if the company owns all the site, it says the trees have been neglected over preceding years. Well, I thought if it was a responsible company, they'd protect all the site, look after all the site, not leave some not looked after.
Sorry, Chairman. Can Mr. Bolter just to sort of explain that
Yes.
his question again, please? Sorry, I've missed that.
All the arboricultural features have been neglected over the preceding years. This leads me to think that not looking after the site, the hedgerows and the rest of the site. If they're a responsible landowner, surely they should have looked after all the facilities on the site. So what confidence have we got that they're going to look after these in the future?
Chair.
Please.
Mr. Bolter, I think the reference is to, can you just have the plan up again on it? So, yeah.
Sorry, Chairman. Technology. Yes, sorry. Oh, here we are.
Oh, here we go.
All right, here we go.
How's the sort you notice that?
Can you point? That's, yeah. That's the red one there. Red one. So I think it's referring in particular to this area of woodland here, which you can see there's like a faint yellow line around it, which is an area of ancient woodland which has over the years become somewhat overgrown with rhododendrons, and I think it's that aspect which the company referred to in the statement. There's a scheme in a site-wide woodland management plan to address that matter, and you'll also see that the landscaping condition strengthens that, and there's a requirement to address that matter in the scheme that's due to come in under the condition.
Point, Chair, if it was a condition in the previous application, it should be maintained as a condition or breach a condition. So So are we confident they're going to look after it now? And if not, what we're going to do about it?
Start this winter.
Yeah, Chairman. Yeah, I mean that's a valid point. The company has to step up to the mark. They have to do what they're obliged to do. I understand that we are chasing them on that. They should have been doing it, and we have enforcement powers. And I understand that they haven't addressed that as yet, but they will. They promise they will address that come the next planting season. Now, we shall wait and see whether they do that. In the past, they have been good operators, and by and large, they do most of the things they do. But like all companies, they don't do everything all the time, Chairman. But I think I have confidence that we will be able to get them to do what they need to do, Chairman. Sorry, Chairman, I just realised I didn't answer a question from Mr. Charlesworth about less than substantial harm. I did forget about that, and I don't like that phrase either. So I agree with Mr. Charlesworth. It's difficult to understand, but it's written that way, and it's lifted straight from national planning guidance, and that's the way it's written. So you have to sort of, and it's also as part of planning law as well. So it's a way that you have to look at things. And as I said at the beginning, it is, and that's why it's important to look at heritage assets and take that into account. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, Mr. Bolter, that the state's surveyors will have you here. She's sitting behind you, so hopefully that she'll take back what you've said.
It's just that, Chair, if they failed on that, we've had some breaches of the dust over the last 18 months. We're near the noise limit. I think the company's really got to look at their operation and see how they can mitigate this with the residents, and not wait for us to take enforcement action against them, because I mean that's the end result, and nobody wants that. But the conditions are conditions, and if they breach them, they're enforced.
Chairman, quite right. In terms of the community, there is a well-established liaison meeting that operates at this quarry, and these issues are raised through that, and and through other means. But Mr. Bolter's quite right that we need to we take action where it's appropriate. And those of you who did the training, whether you covered enforcement, something we may cover in more detail, but as in all enforcement cases, it's whether it's expedient to take action. We will take action, but there are different ways of approaching these problems.
Okay. I haven't received a proposal from anyone yet. Does anyone like to move anything at this time? Trevor?
Chairman, I'm comfortable to move the officer's recommendation. Confident in the fact, to answer Mr. Bolter's point, that there was a dust problem, it was spotted, and enforcement was taken, and actually that brought about a change. And I would hope that tree-wise there would be the same approach as we try to be consistent. So I am comfortable in moving the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Joe. And seconded by David Jennings. If there's no further comments, could we have a vote on all in favour of Trevor's? It looks as though that's unanimous then. Thank you very much for that. Sorry for the delay. I lost my page. Item agenda. Agenda item 11. Greenfields Primary School, Gwendolyn Drive, Countersthorpe. This is permission to build a new building Lonnick will deal with that.
Thank you, Chairman. Briefly, I hope, Chairman. A plan there showing you where the location of the new proposal is, and it's in connection with the free early education and entitlement, which the government are expanding. And so the proposal is to build a purpose building at the Greenfield Primary School. And I've just shown this map here because I believe the existing nursery school is in this area. Mr. Jennings will put me right if I'm wrong. I think it's somewhere there on the scale of that map. So the proposal is at this Greenfield site here. It's going to go just about there, and with some car parking here, and you can see its sort of location and relationship to residential properties, where the report highlights some issues for you to consider. Just to sort of give you a bit more detail, there's a building here on the school site, and then the rest of the school building here. So the building is going to go there with some car parking here. There's a substation here, existing car parking within the school, nearest residential property here with the boundary of that property along there. Again, some details of the building now drawn on the plan, together with new car parking spaces, 14 new spaces to cater for that development. And some photographs just giving you an idea of what the existing site looks like. So this photograph here is looking across to this building here. So that building is there, and the grassy bit is where the proposal is likely to go. Again, here just showing you, stepping back a bit, and the substation is probably just off the picture. Again, the building's going to go there, and then you see the existing car parking here. And again, just looking back from there, back along the car parking here, looking at the side of the buildings along here, just gives you an impression of what the existing buildings are like, because this is what they're proposing to put their standalone building, mono-pitched block, some cladding yet to be finally decided in terms of the colour, but either cedar or plastisol cladding on there. You'll see that there are some issues raised from local residents around parking and traffic and disturbance as a consequences. And those of you who have served on this board before will know that it's very common that anybody living next to school will always raise issues around traffic and car parking, particularly around drop-off and pick-up times. In order to address this, the car parking provision is sufficient to meet the needs of the new proposal. This new proposal won't solve any existing problems, but it shouldn't add or exacerbate what's there at the moment. But what is proposed is a travel plan. I think about 40% of the pupils walk to school currently, so we try to get that a bit higher if we can. There are some issues raised around antisocial behaviour because of the closeness of buildings, but I'm not sure if I really understand that concern, Chairman. But what you will have is an addendum sheet, because from the report you'll see that there were some consultees missing in their responses. And just very briefly, Chairman, the consultee responses we've had now are back from the Highway Authority and from Severn Trent Water, both of whom request some additional conditions, which I'm happy to recommend are added to the conditions already before you. One condition, make sure that any car parking is provided before the building comes into operation. It's quite sensible, accept that one. And also that the development shouldn't be brought into use until the existing travel plan is updated. And you'll see from the report there's a number of issues listed which need to be addressed as part of the travel plan. Again, acceptable and should be imposed. And also Severn Trent have raised issues around drainage. Again, their standard condition is that make sure that they see a scheme which deals with any drainage issues. On that, Chairman, recommendation is to approve subject to those additional conditions.
Thank you, Lonnick. I'd open it open to two members now. I'd like to call on David Jennings, the division member.
Thank you, Chairman. The report contains comments from Countersthorpe Parish Council. I'm a member of Countersthorpe Parish Council, but I have not been involved in any way whatsoever in the preparation of those comments. They have a standalone planning committee that has done that. In fact, until this afternoon, I've not passed any comment at all on the planning application. But I would like to talk for a few minutes about the existing facility they have, which is behind the Countersthorpe College, on a road called the Drive. The nursery school exists there, and it's a great village facility. But it is totally inadequate. It is a Grade 2 listed building that cannot be extended. It's serviced by an unadopted road. The college and Leysden High School recently merged and became an academy, and they have put a very large fence around those schools, which restricts entry and has caused even more problems. Later this year, or whenever, the entitlement for children is to double from 15 hours a week to 30. The building is no longer adequate. Now, the buildings behind the college, which I just referred to in the Drive, used to be a children's home called the Cottage Homes. And this nursery school has existed for well over 100 years. But it was purely originally for the children connected with that home. When it closed round about 1970, and I'm not going to argue the date, I was involved in a campaign to keep it open for the children of the village. It is a great and much appreciated facility. Now, just down the corridor here on the left, between Gosford and Gartree, are some pictures on the wall, and I hope members will have a look when they go, and they are of soldiers in the Royal Leicestershire Regiment. And one of the pictures there is a soldier surrounded by young lads, looking up to him in his uniform, and that is taken in front of the nursery school in 1916. And the soldier there was William Buckingham. And Mr. Buckingham was one of two lads brought up at the Cottage Homes who won the Victoria Cross in the First World War. The other one, he was killed in battle, Mr. Buckingham. The other one survived, Mr. Gere, and went on to become a Member of Parliament. Recently, a green badge was awarded and displayed on the school building. And if you are minded to grant this afternoon, I do appreciate no decision's been made yet, but I want that badge preserved. I want it kept because it is a tribute to the gallant gentleman of a former age. And it is held in high esteem by the people of Countersthorpe. So please can we preserve that. Moving on to the proposals before you for Greenfield Primary School, I was appointed a governor there in 1976, and I was one of the first governors appointed. And the topic of relocating onto the Greenfield site was discussed then, or as I said, it was an infant school and a junior school. It's logical to have them on the same site. One of the problems they have with the existing location, some parents had a child in both schools and they struggle to get from one to the other. I accept there's problems with parking, etc. This, as Lonica has said, these proposals will not solve the existing problems, but they will stop them getting any worse. And I think that's fair enough. Nothing's perfect, and I know not everybody's happy with it. But, Chairman, I am quite happy to support the proposals before you this afternoon. I'm just a little bit sorry that the Highways report wasn't earlier so that we could have had time to study it, but that's not the fault of this council, or not members of this committee anyway. And I support the proposals, Chairman. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Just make some observations first. I don't disagree with Mr Jennings' comments that the existing school is no longer fit for purpose. Don't dispute that. And putting this on this site is the logical conclusion. However, parking. The years that we've been here, we've seen County Highways' responses to these school applications, and time and again they fail to deliver on reasonable. I don't pretend they can get rid of all the problems with parking, but there are things they can do, and they fail most times in coming up with an adequate proposal. I mean, the proposals are put forward. Wow. Yeah. It's as though somebody's spent half an hour doing this and just chucked a paper across to us at the last minute. And I don't find that acceptable, really. When you look at the map and the layout, Laurel Drive is a dead end, so to speak, if we can see it on there, yes, Laurel Drive. I don't know what existing markings are within that road, and I don't know, it doesn't say in the papers what sort of increase in percentage of pupils this is at this school. I don't know whether it's 10%, 50%, I've no idea.
There's 630 there now, some of the 45.
Right, relatively minor then. Okay, thank you for that. But it's an increase, there's going to be an impact. The proposals from Highways deal with off-street, i.e. within the school, very well. It doesn't deal with the problems on-street. There's no suggestion of whether there's going to be any changes to existing markings. I don't know, forgive me, Countersthorpe terribly well, but Gwendolyn Drive, I don't know whether that's a through road or whether that's a dead end or not through road, okay, and I don't know whether any proposals there, but I mean, if I was leaving home and I lived in Laurel Drive at 7:45 in the morning, I imagine it would be pretty difficult sometimes to get out. So my main bone of contention here really is Highways. Can they really do some proper work on these? I know schools across the county have problems at 9:15 and 3:00. We all do. We all deal with it, regular casework. But I just think County Highways have got to step up to the plate.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just a question on the addendum, really, and it's the first paragraph on the second page. And it just made me laugh. It says, reduce single occupancy vehicle use. Well, presumably every person taking a child to a school isn't single occupancy, they're dropping off. So the only people it will affect will be from experience of being a school governor in a previous life, will be the staff who always come in their own cars. So are we actually saying in this addendum that what we're trying to do is to stop staff coming? But parents dropping children off is fine. It just seems a rather crass comment.
I think, Chairman, if I may, it is the travel plan is to deal with everybody going to school, so including teachers, so if they can come on their bike or on the bus instead of a car. But that's the intention, Chairman.
May I ask a question, please? Through you, Chair. I'm just curious, Mr. Charlesworth, about what you think would be a good idea to remedy this. Are you talking about actual entrance and exit into the school car park? Do you think that could be a better design? Excuse me. I'm just curious because, like you, I see this as well, as I bet we all do.
Try and start through the chair, Michael, or not?
I'll give it a go, Chair. I'm not a officer of the Highways Authority, and I don't, sorry David, know Countersthorpe terribly well at all, but I know my schools in my area, and I know the mitigation that we can put in place there, with markings, with bollards, with extensions to zigzags, with proper school travel plans. I know the solutions, and these people know them better than me, and they fail to deliver every time, and it's not good enough.
I suppose, Chairman, just to be fair, this proposal is being dealt with in terms of parking, because that's what this proposal demands. If Mr. Charles is asking, well, can they do something to the existing problem on the back of this planning application, then probably it'd be quite difficult. Whether they can do something outside the planning application as a county council, that's a different matter and beyond the remit of this board, Chairman.
As a separate issue and not connected with this planning application, the parish council are having meetings and have had meetings with the Highways to try and sort out a solution to the parking outside the school. Anything would be a benefit, but as has been said, and I will repeat, there is a problem parking there. This won't solve it, but it will stop it getting any worse.
Thank you, David. I'm still looking for a seconder to...
Yeah, happy to second the
say recommendations plus the recommendations in there.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, it's been moved and seconded, the recommendations on the sheet and also on the addendum sheet. Could I have a vote then? All in favour of David's proposition? Crikey. Unanimous again, that's 3 unanimous.
Chairman, if they can't spell unanimous, I'll vote against it. But coming back to this green plaque award, I realise you can't put it on as a planning condition, but can we put a memo through to someone? Because if this, obviously it's going ahead now, but if the existing nursery school closes, it's going to be sold off or something's going to happen to it, and I don't want to lose that plaque that's on front. It means a lot to the people of County Thorpe.
Chairman, can I just ask, is that part of the Green Plaque Awards? Yeah. Okay. Chairman. Yes, we'll make sure that that's been the right department, yeah.
I did notice Lonick writing it down, David, as you...
I couldn't see it from it.
All agreed.
Okay, that's the end of the applications. So item number 12 now is any other business the items the chairman has decided to take. Well, there aren't any of those. And chairman's announcements, there's none of those either. And can I thank you very much for your kindness during the meeting. You've been very gentle with me up to now, I don't know. Yeah, well, it's very
we can't guarantee it'll continue, Chairman, but I think you've done a very good start. Congratulations.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's closed.
Thank you, Chairman.
Meeting.